Hello. Hi, Kyle.
Hey there. So sorry for I didn't know my camera was off. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks so much for taking this time out with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. It is 12:02 at this point, so far it might just be us. If other people join us, then that'll be awesome, and I'll be sure to let them in. But I'll go ahead and get started just for the sake of time, just to make sure we have enough time for everything. To introduce myself, my name is Renata Sinkowska. I'm the Assistant Director for Membership Services with Amercon Delta Kappa. I primarily work with alumni members and trying to organize events and engagement opportunities. So the career development webinars have been one of my projects, and we're hopeful that you take great advantage of it. So thank you for being here, and thank you, Chris, for joining us as our speaker today. Chris is from the University of Washington 2006 initiate class. So today he'll join us in talking a little bit more about early career development and his experiences and tips on it. So thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to join. So a little bit about me. So I went to George Washington University in DC, and I remember not being taken seriously coming out of like my initial graduating as a fraternity guy. I was also in Pi Kappa Alpha. And so I've now spent the past 15, 20 years as a hiring lead and strategist for different firms. And so I missed some of the employee coaching and development aspects of past roles. And so last year I started what I'm calling early career development coach to work with existing college students, soon to be graduates, those earlier in their search, to help them better stand out as a candidate and demonstrate their value to employers, but also succeed in the roles once you have it. I find there's sometimes a gap between what you're getting from career services or other organizations, and then sometimes you're just left to figure it out in the world once you are in a role yourself. So hopefully this is a valuable resource and happy to adapt and answer any questions along the way. In October of last year, I published my first book called Unlock Your Professional Potential, which really focuses again on standing out as a candidate and then navigating your career development, navigating teams, performance reviews, goal setting, which we'll get into a little bit more as part of this presentation. So starting off with setting career goals, typically long-term targets that, and I'm just going to just move this over here. So forgive me if my face is too angled at times, but don't want to cut off the screen. Um, so basically, career goals, defining what you want to accomplish in your profession, thinking about it over different time frames. Is it a job title? Is it working for a prestigious company, earning a specific salary, making an impact, gaining career satisfaction? All things that matter in your job, but may weigh differently in importance as you grow older, right? Like right out of college, you might just want to make a lot of money, get to a particular salary, and then you can coast a little bit and relax, in your 40s, 50s. So I think there, once you have a family, some of those things matter a little bit more in terms of your how you're balancing and juggling different priorities. So if we're all climbing the corporate ladder, think of each goal or set of 5 years perhaps as being a rung. So what does that, 1 to 5 years out of school look like? What is 5 to 10, 10 to 15? So you're thinking about one, how does each job position you to get there along the way? Is it the right stepping stone? So it gives you additional filters to pressure test what the right moves for you are along the way. And so to improve your chances of success and really honing in and tailoring your search, it helps you make more intentional, informed decisions. So if you don't get something, it might be easier to write it off because it was a little bit of a stretch or a little bit of outside of where you were looking. And it helps build resilience, knowing that, every opportunity is something that matters to you and you're going to get there no matter what. And there are a lot of considerations that go into it. So shaping goals around your definition of success, not what others or your parents might be imposing upon you, or trying to keep up with different peers that are in a completely unrelated track than you might be. But think about it, enlisting the help of a mentor to inform your career goals. Someone who, again, has been through it once, can give you a sense of what you're walking into, what to anticipate, different challenges to navigate, and then breaking down those long-term goals into manageable steps. So you might want to become a vice president, but how do you first become the account executive to the director to the vice president? What are those different skill sets? What does it require? And how are you going to intelligently track that progress? So again, defining goals, breaking it down. How will I know that I've achieved that? And stay flexible. Like you're learning along the way. You don't really know what you don't know. And again, your goals and considerations in your 30s might be very different than your 20s, which are very different than mine now in my 40s. So that gives you a really good foundation to work from and to keep context around what you're searching for. With that in mind, I think it's important to go through sort of a self-assessment and discovery. So understanding your why, what is your unique value proposition, aligning vision, passions, and motivations. So something could be really well compensated, but you feel empty doing it, or something could maybe be a little bit less. In terms of like a paycheck or other elements, but you get more satisfaction out of the work you do. And so aligning those is really important. My dad used to tell me if you wake up every day hating your job, what's the point of it? So if you wake up every day excited to work, you're not really working. And so that is sort of like a really important way to center yourself and what you're doing and the impact you're making. And don't lose sight of sort of balancing the technical expertise as well as soft skills and transferable skills. So, for example, I was an international affairs major, and I've never worked a day in that field in my life, for better or for worse. I'm still paying my student loans against it, but like a lot of what that element of school was learning how to learn, how to work with other people, and how to become an expert in different things. And so no one is going to have a linear journey, as different technology advancements happen or other elements, skill sets shift. And so you will inevitably have a career pivot at some point in your lifetime, I imagine. And so if you think about your typical interview process, the first one or two interviews are generally who are you? What have you done? Would I like working with you? Could I see myself working with you? Are you a good cultural fit? And then interviews two and three get into a little bit more of like the technical aspects. Like you might take a writing test or other sort of, you talk a really good game, but now can you walk it? And so think of it as your entire career is going to be like your most painful college group project over and over again. There's someone who's like not pulling their weight. There's someone who's behind on slides or going in a different direction, or who wants the same A for doing like half the work. And so, how you manage people, how you persuade, how you navigate conflict, all of those are really important in your career. And so, don't lose sight of just being like the Excel expert or I'm the coder. Like you can't really advance in your career if you're not adaptable in terms of how you work with people, how you lead them, how you persuade and inspire them. So typically what I do with my clients and what I like to think through is sort of, breaking the areas of self-assessment and exploration into kind of your background and focus, thinking about your search to date, how your resume reflects that, and then what other past achievements help you stand out. So thinking about your background and focus first, right? Like, what about your past experiences? What worked? What didn't? Why was that the case? What kept you coming back for more? Was it a bad boss? Was it, oh, this sounded cool on paper, but in execution, it's awful? Then your search to date, like what platforms are you using? Are you working with recruiters? What feedback might you be getting, or are you just being ghosted? Are you networking? What's that looking like? As you think about your interviews, any particular highlights of where you did really well? Are there any areas where, oh, if I had the chance to go back and answer that question again, here's how I would do it differently. So how are you reflecting, learning, and improving while making yourself multi-dimensional? So for example, doing more networking and relying less on your resume. A lot of jobs out there that are posted aren't really available. And a lot of jobs that are available aren't always posted. So if you're not virtually networking, if you're not talking to different people, you're not going to get the necessary feedback, but you're also not going to find your way into those side or back doors that might be available. Um, It's one thing to get ghosted by a recruiter, but if you're doing informational interviews with someone in a field or company or team that you want to be on, you're more likely to get feedback than you might get from like HR after an interview. So they're going to be not just a referral source, but also, giving you a bit of a pressure test or reality check on your feedback on your experience and feeding back to you how it fits, where you might have some gaps and how to address them as they hopefully refer you to a hiring manager or other team internally. And then from a resume perspective, and we'll get into this a little bit more later as well, but are your bullets reading like a list of tasks versus things you achieved? So it's really important to quantify that impact, provide a professional summary up top that kind of contextualizes everything that follows, as well as working through an accompanying cover letter. I think one that's something that's a lost art that helps you stand out. But as you're thinking about the resume, how it's coming to life, don't lose sight of your role in the bigger team and the bigger scheme of things. So it can feel like, yeah, I did some research, but ultimately that research fed into something else, that fed into something else. That was the foundation of a decision that someone made. So you're equipping those above you with the right knowledge or the frontline research. It's not just, I did desk side research doing X. I laid the foundation for strategic decisions through the application of first of primary and secondary research tools. So I think there's ways to elevate what feels mundane or feels like a task, but position in terms of what it enabled the team to do. And certainly the professional summary, as you're thinking about that up top as sort of the umbrella statement for your resume. So as you're starting out, your list of jobs and experiences might feel a little bit scattered to someone, and they might not see how each one necessarily ladders into the next. And so that professional summary up top allows you to contextualize your career to date, who you are, but also the two or three things that set you apart and are most beneficial to the firm and the job to which you're applying. So being able to tailor that, your resume and cover letter, versus just doing quick apply or other elements, is going to be one better from a how you position yourself, but also as we get into later, like applicant tracking systems and the gatekeepers, how they score and perceive you will matter. And then from a past achievements, I think again, going back to the technical versus soft skills, I was in, two different fraternities that offered very different experiences in colleges outside of the classroom. But those same elements taught me different negotiation skills or different, power of persuasion than what I might have learned in marketing 101 or something else. And so there are, how can you assess your personal and professional wins, the impact on the business and team, and kind of reposition that? Again, I think when you're in a Greek organization or any other student organization, um, it might not feel like a lot at the time, but I think what gets lost is you're kind of running and managing a corporate franchise. You're doing a lot from a programmatic perspective, from a budgetary perspective, from a personality management, events, recruitment. So I try to tell people those sort of angles to sort of reduce some of the intimidation when you're interviewing with someone, because they've probably never managed an organization of the size that you did or participated in college, or they never managed those budgets or event series. And so I think you have a leg up sometimes in terms of the experience or things that you've been exposed to. Like you've probably had to vet a vendor, negotiate a contract as part of events or other things that most other individuals haven't done. And so those things apply very differently into the real world, and I think becomes lost elements to demonstrate that value. So, but then also community service and obstacles faced within your past. So where do you value and spend your time outside of work? What does that say about you and your passions? But then also, if you've overcome particular obstacles to achieve those things, how do you then continue to convey that resilience that, I don't give up. Here's how I adjust, pivot, understand the situation, and move forward. And here's how I bring that to the job. Um, so all really good things to sort of contextualize or rethink your value proposition and what you bring to the table. And then don't lose sight of networking and mentorship. Again, people who've been there, have seen it, done it already, can help you prepare for what you're about to experience and might not know about. As I said earlier, informational interviews will help provide some insights on not just the ins and outs of various roles, if it's the right fit, is it what you think it is, um, as well as providing more of the feedback that you're not going to get sometimes from a job interview or HR. And both of them offer accountability and fresh perspective. I think there's an element of people remember what it's like to get that first break and they want to help out. Um, but when you're breaking it into timeline based goal setting, it's easier to keep yourself accountable and measure the progress against it versus very loose. Oh, by the time I'm 30, I want to be X, as opposed to in the next 4 to 6 months, I'm going to do this, which positions me for this. And so one framework that you can think about in measuring that and setting that up is called SMART goals. And so if you're not familiar with that, it basically stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So it can help build confidence and direction, help you stay motivated, and track progress. So in terms of kind of going through each one real quick, like specific, being clear and focused, what is it that I want to accomplish? And so maybe in this case, it's I want to build my professional network by attending events. And so I'm going to find them on Eventbrite. I'm going to find them on Meetup. I'm going to find them through this, university or other industry organization that I want to be part of. How are you going to measure that progress or know if you succeeded? So I'll connect with 5 new people at each event and I'll connect with them on LinkedIn afterwards, or I'll send a follow-up email. Is it achievable and realistic? Can you attend? Does your schedule allow? Are there cost considerations to membership or other pieces? So, don't overextend, but then also make sure that it's relevant to the bigger picture. Does it align with your goals? So, is it the right industry networking event versus just small talk at something else? Is it going to help you find your job in a particular area? Um, and then what is the deadline to complete that by? So again, is that achievable? I don't know how often, events are in certain areas, right? So being mindful of that balance, stay flexible. But again, at least just it gives you a framework, again, to hold yourself accountable and against those goals and how they shift over time. So, with all that said, thinking then sort of about how you establish your foundation as a candidate, like I said earlier, if we're just focusing on the resume, you're going to be a little bit one dimensional. So that's where the cover letter comes in, the professional summary, which is a little bit like your elevator pitch, but then also thinking through references, LinkedIn endorsements, and then networking, both in person and virtually. Um, so if you're just using the resume and quick apply without tailoring, you're probably getting lost in the shuffle of things. If you're not using the cover letter, you're not really humanizing yourself or your candidacy quite as powerfully as you otherwise could. And then if your LinkedIn profile is not really optimized, like someone's going to go there before they talk to you based upon your resume. And so do you have references or endorsements there against the skill sets that are important for the job? And then are you having the right conversations to find those side door or back door in? Because not everything that's out there is open and not everything that's open is out there. Um, I don't know if anyone's familiar with applicant tracking systems, but they are the software used by companies to pre-screen your resume and determine if you talk to a real person, and advance to the next stage. And so we hate it as applicants and candidates, but from the company perspective, if you're getting 100 applicants per job, how do you quickly go through those and determine relevance to the job description? So that software is scoring your resume against your years of experience, keyword matching. And so we'll get into that a little bit more, but that's why the tailoring piece really matters because each one's trained differently, as opposed to universally, with the same resume. And then you're writing for software first, but you're also writing for a short attention span of the hiring managers. So only about 20% will spend more than 3 minutes reviewing your resume, whereas triple that almost will spend 1 to 3. And so there's often a predisposition to disqualify someone based upon a quick scan. Oh, budgets are, bullets are misaligned, or there's a typo here, or something like. So I feel like there's when you're that quick, if there's not a summary that very quickly articulates your value proposition and relevance, someone then is scanning, trying to digest information, and if they see a lack of attention to detail or typos or grammatical mistakes, they'll project that lack of attention to detail on other work you provide. And so it becomes, unfortunately, an easy way to disqualify someone when there's so many different options to go through. Um, so if you're not familiar with your elevator pitch, it's sort of like a 30-second, you've got three floors in an elevator. How do you sell yourself someone or sell yourself to someone? And so you want to focus on laying out your professional identity, your relevant experience, any particular expertise, your strengths and impact. And this is going to come to life in a number of different ways. So it's going to be sort of a foundation for that professional summary at the top of your resume. You're going to use it at career fairs and networking events. It's going to pull through into your cover letter as well as your interviews. Think about past interviews. Probably like one of the first two questions is probably like, tell me about you or walk me through your resume. And so that elevator pitch has already kind of answered that question for them and gives you a repeatable value proposition to lead with. And so an easy structure for that is, hi, my name is, I've got X number of years of experience across this industry sector. I've achieved, produced, developed, here's what I'm seeking. And then here's a question or call to action, whether it's, hey, I know you have an internship program. How can I qualify or, best present myself as a candidate for that? Or I'll be graduating in May and I'm looking for an intro opportunity or, you know, in this particular field. Is there anything that might be upcoming? Or is there someone else on within your organization that would be helpful to speak with about that? So there's nothing worse than sort of selling yourself and then not giving them a step to take with that information. But this is a really critical sort of tool that you're going to use in a lot of different ways to convey that value proposition and what you've achieved and why it's relevant to that company or individual. So as we move into resume, so that elevator pitch is going to be at the top of your professional summary. Other sort of common mistakes to avoid are just not using the summary at all, or having it be very generic. Have it focus more on the value in what you do versus what you're looking for. Um, Going back to sort of the highlights of different roles, making sure that they read more as achievements versus job duties. So, for example, instead of responsible for answering phones and filing paperwork, you manage 20 plus client calls daily, ensuring positive customer experiences. It's more than being a cashier. You reconciled more than, X number of dollars in financial transactions per day. So there's always a little bit of, massaging of that language to elevate it. Sites like Indeed offer really great sort of here are 200 different action verbs, so you don't continuously use the same ones over and over. So that diversity of language, avoiding weak language, quantifying things through your language all matter. So think through sort of the formula of strong action verb, what you did and why it mattered. Yeah, you produced a lot on a short timeline, which helped you go to market faster. So different elements, but again, going back to contextualizing, you led research, proprietary research that informed team decision making that ultimately led to successful execution of a program or selling something into a client. Um, I would say also probably the first 10 years of your professional life, your resume should be like one page. So try to avoid overcrowding or unnecessarily using a second page where it's just like the top quarter. So every sort of spot matters. It kind of reflects how you prioritize information, results, relevance. So that one page will be standard for a long time. Um, and then thinking about applicant tracking systems again, um, there'll be different keywords that you can pull over that will help your score. But again, it goes to tailoring each resume for each opportunity because the software trained for what it's looking for is going to be different for each. And then avoiding those inconsistent formatting typos, grammatical errors. So bullets, we'll get into graphics and fonts a little bit in columns as part of the next ATS session. But attention to detail matters. Proofread it, print it out, make sure it's not formatted wonky. Like it might look good when you open it up on Word, but send it as a PDF. Make sure it doesn't open up awkwardly on someone else's computer. Read it out loud. I think it's a document that you get so close to that you almost kind of start memorizing your bullets, and it becomes easy to recognize, oh, this sounds really jargony, or oh, I missed a word here. So have someone else read it aloud yourself. Um, and make sure you're always linking to your LinkedIn profile as well. Um, but it's unfortunately your biggest professional calling card for your entire career. So give it the attention and detail it deserves. In terms of the formats, you know, there'll always be consistent sections. So professional summary, skills, experience, education. On the left is a simple resume format, and on the right is a more modern version, which may be more aesthetically pleasing, but it's awful for ATS systems. So I feel way too many people go this more modern route and spend more time making it pretty as opposed to is the information right for the software reading it? And so ATS systems are indiscriminately just reading left to right. And so when you start breaking information up into different columns, it's going to jumble together when the software combines it. So all this, information on the right-hand side from education to skills, all those words are going to get jumbled up with their experience highlights, and none of it's going to make any sense to the software. You're going to score low and you're going to be kind of disqualified immediately. Whereas the simple resume format, it's easier to scan. You don't have to like, do I read the left side first? Do I read the right side? So it's cleanest and easiest for humans and software to read. Um, so stick with that. And I guess to bring that into visual perspective for a second, here's that simple resume format. But then here's how ATS sees it. So it's scanning for keywords, different phrases, years of experience. And so some of that will naturally be integrated into your bullets. Some of it might be in your professional summary, some of it might be skills. But up to 75% will get rejected automatically because it's not seeing the relevance or you're not lining up as well as others. So think about it as a professor in any class or you're a manager in any meeting isn't speaking for the sake of speaking. And so there's always this, how do I parrot back what I heard you say so that I'm clear on the assignment or the next steps? And think of this in that same vein, here's what I heard you say in the job description, and here's everything that speaks back to that. And they're like, oh, you're a great fit. Great. You've now, not to say like fooled the software, but you're playing into what it's looking for, and it's going to score you higher and hopefully then advance you. So, in terms of some tips, like try to copy over 5 to 7 key phrases. Again, they're going to live in different places, but integrate them naturally, whether it's skills or experience or accomplishments in particular roles. It's looking for numbers. So, the quantification and metrics are super helpful. Avoid text boxes, tables, columns. Don't include your headshot. And just avoid generic descriptions, passive language. A few examples at the bottom, again, just to bring it to life a little bit more. So instead of simply managing social media campaigns, you drove 35% increase in engagement. Instead of coordinated marketing events, it was orchestrated 12 events generating, this much money in pipeline value. Or it was this number of recruitment events that drove new membership of 10 to 15 people for this next semester, which helped us achieve X. It's not just assisting with content creation, but you author content viewed 25,000 times monthly or downloaded X number of times. So again, it's not just kind of what you did, but why it mattered to that audience and how they engaged with it. So great. We've got resume. We're all set. We can like put ourselves and sound really good on paper, but how do we kind of then virtually network and grow our prospects? And I'll admit up front, it's awkward. Um, I've been doing this for 20 years. It still feels transactional and awkward. So the thing I'll say is it does get easier over time. The stakes are lower when you're sort of early in your career, but don't lose sight of in a few years you'll all be the decision makers. And so that network will come to matter, but the entry points are a little bit lower or less skeptical at the moment. Um, And so the best way to do is think about lowest common denominators to break the ice. So did you both go to the same school? Are you both in the same industry? Um, Thinking about it as, tailoring it to who they are, what they do. And so whether that's referencing something that they just posted about on LinkedIn, that their company may have just recently done. And so combining that, here's who you are and here's why you've stood out to me and are someone I'd like to connect with. So making it about them, recognize their experience, play to their ego a little bit. Again, I think some people always want to help out those because they know what it's like, but some people really like to be viewed as that expert. And so asking them about their perspective or experience that lets them be the unique kind of expert that they are, always helps. Try to follow up with a meaningful or easy question geared toward that perspective that enables you to help build rapport without pressure. So obviously not starting with, hey, can you help me get a job? But like, what's something unique about your role that you wish you knew before you got the job or that others from the outside should understand? And then after a couple exchanges around that, I think it becomes a little bit easier to ask for the call, which then can hopefully allow for a referral to happen naturally. Um, and even if it doesn't, keep the relationship alive. Even if now's not the right opportunity, you've added someone else to your network. You've demonstrated who you are, and they're going to trust you, or maybe think of you first the next time something opens up. So I can speak anecdotally that a lot of times where I've been the first loser on certain job interviews, I'm now like the first hire the next time something comes up. So relationships are really important, and things do come back around. And so here's just like a brief script to help kind of put it all together. And so it's, opening up with, hi, my name is this. I'm exploring roles at, your company. Would greatly appreciate your perspective and advice. Would you be open to connecting? Or if you're reaching out to a recruiter, it's, I'm about to graduate or I recently graduated with a degree in X looking to do Y. Um, might you be able to guide me or is there someone else maybe that I should speak with? And so it's I think LinkedIn messages without some kind of short message can often be like, oh, is this person about to sell me something? Or what is the context for this request? So a short little message that just sort of contextualizes the outreach is always helpful. And so if they connect and agree, following up with, again, going back to something that's low key, but what is something about your experience that you wish you knew or others might not understand? Again, unique to them. And then depending upon how they come back, try to explore a virtual coffee or a call or meet up if they're local. But if you have a few minutes, would love, no pressure, but just would be great to learn more from your experience. And then toward the end of the conversation, acknowledge how helpful it's been, the appreciation for their time. Remind them if you haven't got to it yet, acknowledge that you're exploring a particular team or role. And from their perspective, do they think based upon what they know, what you've just told them about yourself, is your background the right fit? Does that make sense? So if they say yes, ask them how they might advise you to get on hiring manager's radar. So it kind of puts them, one, you're taking them from being an expert in something to now being a problem solver. And so people obviously want to respect referrals from other people, work with people that someone endorses or trusts. So it just helps set you apart from the list of, scored resumes that the ATS system has spit out. But if they don't mention a referral or maybe they don't know, I mean, certain large organizations might take some time. So it's, hey, I know someone in HR, but I'm not sure if that's totally the team they work with, but happy to set up that conversation and then let them guide you. So it can take some time to get to the right person, but every conversation hopefully opens a door in that direction. And so then it's, would you feel comfortable referring me that might be able to get me a little bit closer to that hiring manager? So a little bit of a template script, but helps kind of keep it simple, plays to their unique knowledge base without feeling overly transactional or like, hey, can you help me get a job as the lead? So we've done all that. We've set ourselves apart. We're now in the interview phase. I think I don't know if anyone's heard of the START or SOAR frameworks, but they're good ways to prepare for interviews to contextualize different situations, what you did, the action you took, the result, and then the takeaway or how it applies to the job to which you're applying. So, one, beyond giving you a framework to respond to particular answers, it does so in a way that demonstrates self-awareness and emotional intelligence, how you've dissected good and bad past experiences, what you've learned from it, as well as your ability to be coached. Um, so there are a lot of different, ways that behavioral and skill questions come to life. So we're not going to go through all of these, but regardless of the phrasing, ultimately, a lot of the upfront questions are seeking to understand, your approach to teamwork and collaboration. How do you solve problems? How do you communicate? What kind of organizational skills do you have? How might you lead, prioritize, or delegate different teams? So it's going to be, can you share an example of when you successfully collaborated with someone? Or tell me when you had to get someone on board with your idea. Was there someone difficult to work with, and how did you address that? But ultimately, again, a lot of ways to bring it to life, but it's, again, how do you engage with other people? How do you make it easy to work with you to either get on your side or, gain consensus with them to make or impact that organizational change that moves the project forward? Um, and so using kind of the start framework, going through one example being that, tell me about a time you had to meet a tight deadline. So one answer is acknowledging that, yeah, deadlines are part of the job. I prioritize my work, stay on track, and get everything done. Fine. But if you think about it from the start perspective, one way to bring it to life is acknowledging that in a previous role, you were launching a new product. You had a short timeline than usual to bring it to life. So you've contextualized this situation. Your task was being responsible for creating guides for the customer service team. Seeing sort of the conflict here, the action you took was you mapped out a schedule, you collaborated with others. Yes, you might have had to work late a couple evenings to finish on time, but the result was you launched successfully. There was a lot of positive feedback, and the takeaway is acknowledging that this role involves fast-paced projects, shifting priorities or deadlines, and here's how I've adapted to make those work and to meet those objectives in past roles, which I bring to the table in this particular role. So again, it's what did you do? Why does it matter? And how does that work for them going forward, as opposed to just you and how you work, but what it brings to the table, what it enables, and what it helps solve. Um, and if we're going to think through that in SOAR, maybe again, another example is tell me about a time you faced a challenge with a team member. So one answer is that, hey, there was someone in my office who was difficult. We didn't get along, but we just, stayed focused on our work. Again, that's not going to be a reality in most office environments. Like avoidance isn't a solution. So thinking about kind of the larger context here, when I was managing a cross-functional project, one team member consistently missed deadlines, which slowed down the timeline. So that's the situation. You know, you work to understand the obstacle, which was that they felt overwhelmed but weren't speaking up, and it affected the team. So the action you took was scheduling a one-on-one to better understand the issues. You helped reassign a portion of their workload. You checked in more frequently, and the result was performance improved. Everything worked out. We finished ahead of schedule. And so there's the practical application of soft skill sets in this situation to the benefit of the team and the project and the end result. So it's not just about sort of how you approach stuff, but what is the context around it? Why does it matter to this employer? And in so many ways, areas that you won't have to learn on the job. But most importantly, when it comes to interviews, it's a two-way street. So you should be interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And so if the average interview process is 3, 4 interviews, a lot of questions can be asked over time as opposed to trying to all be squeezed into one. But some important buckets to think through your line of questioning should be the role, the goals and expectations, the team, the culture and leadership, as well as growth and development opportunities. So, what created the role? Like, did the last person quit? Were they promoted internally? What are the challenges that this next person would need to solve right away? How will that be measured? Within the team and culture, right? Like, how are the responsibilities divided? What's the working styles? What is the culture and the leadership vision? How's conflict managed? But also, how are they going to train you? No one steps into any role with all the answers or all the right skill sets. So is it, here's a link to a SharePoint site, good luck? Or is there a lot of programming designed to help skill up in terms of what's necessary to succeed in your role, but also to grow within the company? So is there a trend that a lot of people grow internally, or is it a high churn environment? And so sometimes their body language and answering some of those tougher questions may tell you more than the words they say, but are really important to understand kind of what you're walking into, and if it's the right stepping stone to where you want to go in that first, 5 years or the next 5 to 10. But all that said, there are a few other questions I'd like to highlight that are really, I think, helpful to drop in. And so if you've seen many job descriptions, there might be a really wide salary range. And so up front with that recruiter or hiring manager, clarifying what is the difference from their perspective between the 40K bottom of the band or 60K at the top of the band. I've seen bands are like 65 to 180. What does that even mean? Like what are those different levels? What does that look like? And so hopefully you can then use that insight to your advantage to one, highlight those skill sets that will set you apart in the subsequent interviews. But then if you're offered the job, to be able to negotiate to the higher end. So if you go through the process successfully, they offer you the job at 40K instead of 60, hey, I heard when we were talking initially, the difference between 40 and 60K is X. And I feel like I've demonstrated that by, one, two, three, as part of the interview process that got us here. So, I would propose a starting salary of X. So it's a way to sort of use their words against them, as best you can. And then from an onboarding and training, how do they manage that process with new employees? Um, really gives you a sense of how well you will be supported. Will you be set up for success, or are you kind of just living on an island? Because there's the understanding the work, the client, where assets live, but then there's also understanding the political nature of any office, where different responsibilities and leadership lie, and how to navigate those dynamics. I've When I started my career, like in my first internship, it was basically like, you might not know the answers, but the person two cubicles down probably has. So go talk to them. So how resourceful are you, or are they enabling that and pointing you in the right direction? There are only so many ways to do stuff. So if you're at like, is there a template that already exists? So again, not recreating the wheel, not wasting time, but also who can you learn from? And then from a qualifications or fit perspective, a good question to end an interview with sometimes is, are there any additional hesitations or questions about my qualifications for this role? If you think about most conversations or interviews or other things, kind of the last thing you hear is what you remember most. And so it's a way to help proactively uncover any remaining concerns or issues, misperceptions, at the end of the conversation that you can proactively address in the remaining time together, or address directly in the thank you email that you're going to send in the next 24 hours. Sometimes you might have to think about it a little bit more, to address it correctly, but at least understanding what gaps, on their side, might still exist that you can fill, while they're still thinking about you and considering you. And then lastly, work-life balance, super important, but try to think about it as work-life integration. I think if you lead too much with work-life balance kind of questions, it can come off as though you're not willing to work hard, but instead of how will this work integrate with my life? So if I'm coming in early for something, can I leave early? If I had to work on a Saturday, can I take a comp day on a Wednesday when things slow down? So there's an acknowledgement that not everything is going to happen 9 to 5. There's going to be need for some late nights, early mornings, maybe weekends. But how do you get that time back, is really important. So think about it as the integration versus balance, and leading with it that way. So I'll shut up there for a few minutes. I know I've talked a lot for the past, 45 or so, but any questions on what we went through, anything that you were hoping to hear that maybe you didn't? So I'll just open it up to the floor from here.
No, it's been great, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it, especially when you start talking about what the difference is between like a 60K employee and a 40K employee. Just making that a little analogy, a little comparison right there kind of opened my eyes a little bit. So I have no questions, but I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I wish the bands were that small. I see them like it's 235 to 500. Like, do you even know what you're doing? So I think there are a lot of like small red flags on job applications or job descriptions that can maybe give away like, are they building a resume bank? Is this a clear role? Am I stepping into something that's just going to be chaos? And, so again, I think there's sometimes we're so desperate for a job that we overlook certain things, or we want to make excuses, or we don't interview back hard enough. And then you're like 2 weeks and you're like, oh crap. I maybe I could have seen that coming, you know. And so there's always this. I've definitely had one or two situations where like the grass isn't always greener, but a title or a number looks really good. And so how do you kind of balance those considerations with, what you're willing to go through day in, day out with a manager or on particular clients that is going to be so soul sucking that, you're going to hate your life and you're going to be gone in 6 months looking for something new.
Well, if there isn't any other questions, or at least not for the moment, thank you so much, Chris. This was really great presentation and really engaging and hopefully enlightening to the job market and the job search for those in it. So thank you again, and thank you for joining the webinar, and keep a lookout for more to come. And I'll also be sending out to all those who came and those who registered Chris's information along with the recording. So for those who weren't able to see it, you'll have a reference and you can always look back on all the information that was shared today. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me with any questions in regards to the webinar, or if you need to connect further with Chris, we'll be happy to do that. But thank you so
Yeah.
much, everyone.
Thank you so much for the time today. Thank you for the opportunity. And if I can be a resource in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Perfect. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again.
Likewise, thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care. Talk soon.